Okay, there's a question that there seems to be confusion on that I've noticed, and it took me a long time to figure this one out, is what exactly is pemmican or pemmican? I don't know how to pronounce it, actually. But yeah, it took me a long time to figure out what pemmican actually is. And who knows, I might be wrong about this, but it's raw meat that has been fully dried, pounded, and then stored for later use. Okay. Now, the way to prepare pemmican that I've found in the literature is you'd hang the meat, you'd slaughter the animal, hang the meat up on racks in the sun. That was the most common way, so it was seasonal, like during the summer and fall. Usually during the fall when the flies have been killed off by the frost. Okay, unless you live in an area, a mountainous area or something that had very few flies. You can't really hang the meat during the season where it can become infested with insects. You know what I mean? So it was seasonal during a seasonal harvest. The meat was sliced with stone knives usually. You know, if it's cool, you can actually cool the meat and slice it with bone knives as well. So either bone or stone knives, usually stone, hung up to dry on racks in the sun, or you can light fires if it's humid and dry the meat over a fire on these racks. Once the meat is dry, you take the leanest cuts for the pemmican, pound it on a stone with another stone, okay, until it becomes powdered or almost powdered. Remove the little sinews and stuff, and then pack it into a bladder of some type, like a stomach bladder or other rawhide bladder, and then poke holes in the bladder and then set it aside again to dry and to shrink. The bladder will shrink and compress the pemmican, okay, so it can be stored easily. It's a small package, and it can be eaten over the winter, over several weeks or months. Okay, that's how I've found it in the literature and actual first-hand accounts, and the type of pemmican that was traded to Europeans by Native Americans for various things in exchange, and I can't figure out any other method that would work. I've seen many recipes for pemmican on the internet, and they all seem to be very weird. More like jerky, where it's just solid pieces of dried meat with various seasonings, various temperatures, and blah blah blah. Temperatures in it's almost cooked in a lot of cases. But pemmican, as far as I know, is raw meat. Okay. And the reason why it's important to make that distinction is because if you cook meat, you eliminate some of the vitamins, or you decrease some of the vitamins within the meat. And one of the most important vitamins you decrease with cooking is vitamin C. Okay? If you cook meat long enough, almost all vitamin C will be taken out, or chemically rendered inert or whatever, so we can't absorb it. So the raw meat is important. Now, during seasonal slaughters of animals, especially bison, I think that was a very popular seasonal event with bison. A lot of it can be eaten raw, and a lot of it was, especially the blood and stuff, before it became coagulated or whatever. And then the leanest cuts were saved for the pemmican. Now that's important too, and the fat and the internal organs and all that from the animal were eaten first. Now, how do you prepare the pemmican for eating? Okay, you can eat it straight, powdered, but it was usually prepared with hot fat, usually bear fat. You'd heat the bear fat in some way to make it fluid, and then you'd add the pemmican to it to create a kind of a paste. And then either you would eat it straight as a paste or spread it on a flat cake of some sort. And these cakes were usually made out of acorns, acorn flour, or some other nut type of flour mixed with something as a binder, maybe with eggs or something, and then eaten that way. Before agriculture led to corn being used as the main ingredient for these cakes, I think nut cakes were very popular. Now, why there's confusion on it, I don't know, because I mean we had interaction with Native Americans for hundreds of years, and we've experienced this type of food from them, and then this is lost now. There's hardly any accurate sources on what pemmican is. So just to recap, pemmican is dried raw meat, not cooked in any way, probably washed beforehand in a river or a well. Usually what they would do is dig wells, because rivers, regardless of what people say, were still contaminated in some cases, because people living along the rivers would bathe and would bathe in the rivers and do their business in the rivers, and they would become contaminated. So they would dig a well, get your water from the well, wash the meats, dry the meats, and during a certain season, when there was no flies or other insects that could contaminate the meat, when it was sunny and windy, or they would supplement the drying process with fires, store it for later use, and then when you prepare it, you mix it with fat. So you have the protein and the fat together, which is more beneficial than just straight protein. There's a thing called rabbit starvation, which means you're eating protein, but it's too lean, and you don't have the energy from the fat that you need, or your body's not using or able to use the protein efficiently as fat. So you start to starve or become emaciated because your body needs some source of energy, so it's actually burning the protein. But burning protein requires a lot of energy itself. So it's a spiral, it's a downward spiral. So you combine the pemmican with fat. There's some accounts where they would add berries or sweeteners, or maybe even sea salt or something to spice it up was common. I even heard later on they would char corn cobs or maize on the fire and grind it up as a spice. The charred maize or charred corn husks would... I've tried it too. It's not that good, but it's something that was a spice back then. Excuse me. Anyway, you could spice it up after you stored the pemmican. You don't store the pemmican with anything mixed with it. Nothing. I've heard that you'd pour fat in with the pemmican and mix it up and then store it. I think in that case, that might be an exception, but that was over the winter when the fat was able to solidify and become hard, and the whole business was a hard block. Okay, because if the fat is not solidified, it will ooze out of your container. Okay, especially if you poke holes in that bladder for ventilation, the fat is going to ooze out. So perhaps that was a technique used in winter, but I don't think it was used in all areas at all times. You know what I'm saying? You can store meat in a very hot and humid environment for long periods of time, as long as it's a lean meat and very dry, which means you would have to keep it hung up in your lodge or in your shelter above the fire or somewhere where it was not exposed to any kind of rain or moisture. Okay, that's it.